John O'Sullivan is CEO of Principia Scientific International. John, many thanks for your time.
You're welcome, Mike.
Look, politicians are all jumping on the net zero emissions bandwagon. At the recent Leaders Climate Summit, which Joe's forgotten about already, several industrial nations such as Japan and Canada pledged to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Can this goal even be explained in scientific terms?
Well, we're back at Groundhog Day here, Mike. You know, the pandemic has died a death now. It seems to be going down the pan. So they're going to try and breathe life back into the climate scare story. And you've got the same old characters coming out of the woodwork again, haven't we? We've got the usual crowd. John Kerry, I see, is the new climate czar for Joe Biden. And he did a very interesting broadcast on YouTube recently, and got the whole of 23 people watched it, I think. So public enthusiasm for this is not not hitting the high level. So I think they're clutching at straws with this one, Mike.
Instead of net zero emissions, perhaps the real focus should be net zero politicians, net zero academe, and net zero bureaucrats, because the ruling class really are acting like stupid nits, aren't they?
I think they lost the plot, Mike, because they don't know how to prevent the economic collapse that's coming due any time now. I mean, we all know that we've been living on borrowed time. The financial situation across the whole planet is dire. The pandemic has put the whole world economy in lockdown, and people are racking up debts. So that the rich elite that run us, they want to make sure they keep their coffers topped up. So they're going to find a way for the rest of us to pay, and the way they're going to do it is another scam. And the thing is, they run out of ideas. They tried global warming from the 1980s onwards, and that died a death. As we all know, that interest in the Paris Climate Accord was absolutely negligible. No country would do anything other than pay lip service to it, and there's no real commitment from any large bodies of nation, least of all the ones that pollute the most. You talk about China. China does nothing. India does nothing. It seems that always the Western economies are the ones having to take the brunt. Yourself in Australia, I mean, your so-called carbon footprint is probably less than 1% with your economy the way it is. And it's same here in the UK. We're a service economy now. We don't really produce anything anymore. Our carbon footprint's pretty much negligible. So all these politicians spouting about net zero, it's going to be net zero by default. We'll all be unemployed and on UBI, Universal Basic Income, at this rate.
Can you tell me, because I'm a Monty Python fan, I mean, I've been watching Boris, and I'm just wondering whether it's a prelude to a new series, a remake of Monty Python. What the hell is wrong with Boris Johnson? I mean, you be a doctor. You be the doctor of Boris Johnson's nonga, and tell us what's wrong with him.
It's the hairstyle. I mean, it starts from there and you work your way down, don't you, really?
Johnny Rotten. Actually, Johnny Rotten hairstyle.
Yeah. Who gives him couture advice? Who gives the guy tips on styling? I don't know. It's a bit scary. You can normally weigh somebody up by their appearance. Well, that's what I tend to do. We tend to judge somebody within 2 or 3 seconds of meeting them. If you meet Boris at a conference, say, and you think, good God, is this the leader of a country? But as you and I know, Mike, these politicians, they're really just the front men. They're puppets. They don't make the decisions. They're only there to put a public front on things. The real decision makers are the billionaire class, who we never see. So again, he's a fool. We know Boris Johnson's a fool, but probably like Barack Obama is good at reading a script, and that's all they have to do.
Tim Flannery, who used to be one of Australia's chief climate change advocates, said, "To reach net zero, it's vital that we replace all fossil fuels use, meet all of our energy needs with renewables, and take concrete action to restore damaged landscapes, promote resilience of those living on the land, and repair past harm to the atmosphere. Doing this will reduce the new emissions of greenhouse gas to as close as zero as possible, and remove the greenhouse gases we put there in the past." Now, what's the sense of removing the greenhouse gas we've put there in the past? And more importantly, John, is this scientifically even possible, or maybe just another script for Monty Python?
I mean, that whole paragraph of nonsense is you know, trying to pick it apart from a scientific perspective, you're struggling because from on every level it's wrong. Greenhouse gases, first of all, that's a theory that's been disproven. You know, we can talk about more CO2 in the atmosphere. Well, you know, it's 400 parts per million, over 400 parts per million. Global warming? What global warming? There's been no warming since 1998. Even NASA's got 15 satellites monitoring the Earth temperature, and they can see no warming since 2005. In fact, the past 12 months is cooling. Even worse, this month in April, believe it or not, in Germany and the UK, we've had the coldest April for 100 years. That's global warming, Mike. You know, greenhouse gases, 400 parts per million, and you know, it's getting colder, not warmer.
Well, they say we're actually heading into another ice age. NASA even, I recall reading a while back, they said that the sun was losing, you know, it has moments of not being as strong as it normally is. And so, I mean, just even a couple of hundred years ago, there was a mini ice age, and many hundreds of thousands of people died, and you know, nothing grew on the land because it was too cold. So I suppose we, in a way, should welcome warmth and fear cold.
Well, this is the tragedy, Mike, because we should be preparing for an ice age, not a global warming period. If you look at the great authorities in the world who are not selling out to the billionaires, for example, even the Chinese say we're looking at perhaps 2 years of cooling. If you look at the Russian Pulkova Observatory, they're saying now maybe 200 years of cooling. The Russian Academy of Sciences, they say there's nothing unusual about modern temperatures. So this hyperbole about global warming, when reality is global cooling is the danger, because if it gets colder, Mike, we can't grow anything.
No.
And we need to grow. I mean, right now, India has just had a record wheat harvest. Despite the lockdown, despite the so-called scares about the pandemic over there and the virus, you know, and the greening of the planet is an amazing thing. You know, NASA, of all people, I mean, they measure everything from satellites. They'll tell you that with higher levels of CO2, the planet's been greening. The Sahara Desert, for example, you may not know this, Mike, but you've got thousands of square miles of extra greening going on there. You know, and the ironic thing here is that CO2, Mike, is plant food. And people don't seem to realise that. They think of carbon. They're told to think about carbon. Well, it's not carbon, it's carbon dioxide. We don't say, when we refer to water, we don't say hydrogen. Point is, Mike, that
I do.
These there's three atoms in a carbon dioxide. For every one molecule of carbon, you've got two of oxygen. Like with water, for every molecule of hydrogen, you've got two molecules of oxygen. So they're playing fast and loose with the science here, Mike, and it's fooling people. You tell carbon, think carbon to somebody, and they'll think of soot, which is fair enough. Soot is a form of carbon, but so is a diamond. You know, so is graphite, and it's just so woolly thinking that they can just toss out a word like carbon, cut your carbon emissions, and you know, and anybody with that scientific background, they're easily fooled by this kind of narrative. So, you know, what we're doing, Mike, and what you're probably doing is trying to wake people up to the propaganda these politicians are throwing out at us to cover their own incompetence.
And speaking of Ice Age, I see that Boris Johnson got in a spot of bother, bit of trouble for decorating his igloo, aka flat. Yeah. So that's another thing Boris has got to worry about besides the hairstyle. Very scary future for Boris. Now, leaders like Boris Johnson, who is implementing policies such as congestion taxes, outlawing diesel and petrol using cars, expecting people to be walking everywhere in 2035. What other nonsense is Boris, the hair man, promising in the name of climate change?
Well, I think the biggest one is the pushing for electric vehicles. You know, as you said, they're going to ban the use of diesel and petrol-driven vehicles, and we're going to all go to electric vehicles. And we've got Elon Musk, of all people, coming out on the bandwagon, obviously with Tesla, his baby there, and he's offered a prize of $100 million to anybody who can come up with a new technology for carbon capture. So they're chucking out these prizes, but nobody's winning them because there's no way to win them, Mike, because it's nonsense. You know, electric vehicles, for example. Let's talk about electric vehicles and how green they are. They're not green at all. You take one typical electric car, that to produce that car battery, that's equivalent to 8 years of driving on petrol. But people don't see it that way. They think, well, there's nothing coming out of the tailpipe. It's clean, it's green, it's going to get an electric car. But no, that is toxic in the building and creation of that vehicle. The lithium ion, for example, in the batteries, that's mined somewhere in outer Mongolia. The Chinese have that sewn up, and they're using child labour to produce it. And what they're doing then is they're transporting it thousands of miles. Again, more CO2 emissions coming through the transportation there. And you're looking at the construction of the vehicles. And, as you know yourself, these vehicles, you charge them up overnight and they'll run for about 30 miles and you've got to charge them again. So they're not practical either.
And more so in Australia. I mean, we've got these great distances. So I think with every Tesla, you probably get a tent and a outdoor barbecue and a little disposable potty, and then you could probably plug it into someone's PowerPoint on their farm, and you'll get there eventually, but not quickly.
And the thing about just talking about Elon Musk again, I mean, when he made this announcement for his 100 million prize, he said, right, we've only got one planet, he said, and I think even though 0.1% chance of disaster, why should we run that risk? Let's do something. It's crazy. And only last week, Mike, 2 people were killed in a car crash, in a Tesla car crash, because nobody was driving. Where's the risk in that, Elon? What are you talking about, guy? It's crazy.
But it'd be great, though, to sit in the back seat. You and I could have a cocktail, just watch ourselves die. It doesn't really work for me. But Elon is pushing Mars, so I suppose that's still a way off. In fact, it's 9 months off from here to there. But I suppose Elon is still looking at living on other planets, which I think is, personally, I think is very exciting. The Chinese, as we talked about prior, they're probing Uranus, but in a different way. So I mean, the world
is
one
out every time, Mike.
I like it, and that's what I do. My friend of mine says, laugh at the first time he tells a joke because he'll keep telling it. Now, what I've done is I've progressed. You may laugh, but I'll tell it again because I thought it was really funny. John, how many nations are aiming for net zero emissions by significantly increasing their use of nuclear energy? Or are most politicians relying on renewable energy to get them there?
Well, I think a lot of people are keeping their cards close to their chest on the nuclear side of it. As you know, Japan really screwed up badly with Fukushima. And we know that the major nuclear powers, they've got the technology already. They're not going to give it up either, are they? So China, Russia, the US, France, UK, and you can add to that Israel as well, maybe 1 or 2 other countries. They've got the technology there and they will be developing the capability to use nuclear power. But as you know, it takes 20 or 30 years to develop an industry and bring things up on stream. At the moment, we know that China is knocking out about 1 new coal power plant a week or something like that. So, coal is still the main source of energy. And, it's... Like I said, go back to the point I made about CO2, Mike. But more CO2 means more greening. It's plant food, so why waste a good opportunity? Let's burn some more coal.
That's what I think. Get those briquettes out and let it rip, baby.
Well, it's better than burning wood, Mike. I mean, or go back to the Greens. I mean, in the UK, we're importing wood pellets to burn. And if you know anything about when you're burning wood, that's even more toxic than burning coal. So the green way of doing things seems to be causing more problems than solutions.
What's wrong with hydrogen, though? I mean, Australia has jumped on the bandwagon of the hydrogen bandwagon. How can this be a clean energy source?
It's not. Well, if you talk about green hydrogen, the end product is clean because what you're doing, you're effectively taking lots of water, and you're again taking the hydrogen molecule out and leaving oxygen. Very clean in principle, but look at the cost. I mean, I'll tell you, it takes to get 1 kilogram of green hydrogen, you create 70 pounds of CO2, Mike. 70 pounds of CO2. So again, it's not feasible. And again, if you talk about your transport, I mean, we just said about Elon Musk electric cars being dangerous, but you imagine your hydrogen-powered car. Remember the Hindenburg? That didn't go down too well, did it?
Well, it went down.
Hydrogen's a very, very volatile gas, Mike, and you don't even see it burn. I would not fancy a hydrogen-driven car, or a hydrogen-powered car at all.
You have a good point there. I'm just going to write this down to make sure that I don't hop into any balloons with hydrogen. Even if numerous industrial economies reach net zero in 2050, what impact will this have on limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees? And tell us about, I should have some music here, but I won't because of licensing, so we'll just hum. Tell us about this magical goal.
1.5 degrees, 6 foot distance with your masks. The pandemic narrative, the global warming narrative, they've got to give the public something to get their teeth into that sounds sciencey, sounds as if it's credible. 1.5 degrees, what does that mean, Mike? I mean, we've got 1.5 degrees is probably natural variability. I mean, you've also got thermometer error. We know for a fact that we've got 180 years of temperature records from thermometers, ground thermometers, and in what they're called Stevenson screens. You may have seen them where they have screens 3 feet off the ground. Well, they vary by 2 degrees or more. So the margin of error is quite large. It even accounts for the 1.5. So where they're getting the numbers from, and half a degree, I mean, that's nonsense across the planet. I mean, you ask yourself, Mike, what is the correct temperature of planet Earth? They're almost thinking that the carbon dioxide is a control knob of the planet. It's not. It's just nonsense. And I don't know how they've come up with these numbers, Mike, because it has no basis in science.
I think we should be leaving it to people like Bill Gates. I mean, the idea of covering the planet in chalk dust. I mean, that's really good. It must have really cranked up your juices a bit there. You would have thought this guy is just fantastic.
He gave the game away there, though, Mike. Just think about it for a minute. If he's doing that, then they're admitting that the sun is actually the driver of our climate. And yet, the IPCC has been telling us for 40 years it's not. That humans drive the climate. So, kind of no joined up thinking there at all, is there, Mike?
There's not. Now, just we'll do a bit of a left-hand turn here. Censorship. We hit it again this week. We had someone talking about COVID and YouTube took us off. How? Because we're talking about the environment here. We're talking about wacky stuff here. We're talking about politicians and bureaucrats. Joe Biden has said that we're in a climate emergency. He's forgotten that, by the way. But anyway, he did say that we're in a climate emergency. Censorship. Can you see the censorship, such as the COVID hysteria, just migrating to climate change? Do you think they'll start shutting down everything?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying if you look at what's been mentioned, we go back to good old Klaus Schwab. These people are drawing the parallels between the lockdowns for the global warming. They saw the global economy, pretty much collapse with the COVID calamity, and they're thinking, well, how good is it to have all these vehicles off the road and all the emissions being reduced and all those noisy people locked up in their homes, keeping out of our way. So, it's such a good idea if you're a psychopathic billionaire to find another scare story to put people out of the way. It's all part of their big agenda, Agenda 21, Mike, to depopulate the planet.
Bill Gates, who once said that we need 300 million less people on the planet, is now advocating that we take vaccines. So is there method in his madness? And we'll leave that for another discussion. John O'Sullivan, CEO of Principia Scientific International. John, how do we find out more about Principia Scientific International?
Well, the best place to find us, Mike, is on the website. It's principia-scientific.org. And Principia Scientific International, just Google us. Don't use Google if you can afford to use it. Use Tor or DuckDuckGo, any other search engine, but avoid all the mainstream billionaire nonsense on Google.
John O'Sullivan, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.